We'll have to start things off this week by addressing our enemies. I recently posted a video on the channel looking at every Celtic striker of the 21st century. And in that video, I mentioned that Robbie Keane had tainted his legacy with the Celtic support by managing in Israel during their ongoing genocide. I'd never had any complaints about those comments before. Then they came one after the other, two just 60 seconds apart. The first one from Mr. Green, who said, "Had to spoil it by mentioning politics in Israel, so you're not allowed to manage a football club because they play in Israel. Also, I'm pretty sure it was the terrorist scum known as Hamas who committed genocide. Robbie Keane is a legend and a very successful manager, and hopefully he will not come to my beloved Celtic to endure shit from a small section of arseholes that pretend to support Celtic." Now, as mentioned, that wasn't the only comment. 60 seconds later, some random mad person, that's what he calls himself, not my words, said, "Great video, up until you misquoted Israel defending itself against the terrorist organisation known as Hamas. It isn't genocide. If it was, they'd have all been wiped out by now." Now, here in Channel 67, we don't just exist to inflame people, to make people angry, and to work people up. So after much consideration, self-reflection, thinking things through, we have come to the conclusion that going forward, the criticisms of Israel will never stop.
Yes, yesterday, after what has been a long year, Celtic finally identified the man who could replace Kyogo Furuhashi, who departed us, almost a year ago. And that man is Kyogo Furuhashi.
A guy, I mean, it would be very, very Celtic-like to replace Kyogo with Kyogo, you know?
Right, I mean, the closest we got to replacing Kyogo was with Kyogo himself, but then
it's a disgrace that absolutely, down the year, that we still haven't been replaced, and Celtic's option here appears to be don't replace Kyogo, replace Kyogo with Kyogo potentially a year down the line.
I didn't like the Kyogo rumours in terms of what are we doing?
Yeah.
Replacing Kyogo a year later with Kyogo.
Who do we replace? Who do we replace Kyogo with? We thought about Kyogo.
Celtic were looking to replace Kyogo Furuhashi with Kyogo Furuhashi, Ryan.
What I would say is it's not great planning for Celtic. I look at Martin O'Neill replacing Martin O'Neill. I look at Jota replacing Jota. I look at Kyogo replacing Kyogo. Now, it's indicative of a club that's not very well run.
Which brings us to today's episode. On Channel 67, we've always discussed all things Celtic fan media and the internet. So why not take a look at the entire history of Celtic and the World Wide Web? We've broken it into three different eras. First up, the prehistoric era, which looks at the 90s and the early 2000s. This is when very few people had access to the internet. Maybe only one house on the street had access to the internet, and when you would go down, if you were a young boy, there were two things you wanted to look up. If you were slightly older, maybe there was something else you wanted to look up first, but for people my age, it was WWF and it was Celtic, and the first thing you would find would be flash websites like this with Bart in his Celtic gear, just made by internet users of the time. But that wasn't all you would find, because predating even these flash websites, you would get the Usenet threads. Now, Usenet was sort of a precursor to the message boards and forums where people could post a thread and then others could reply. What sort of thing were Celtic fans talking about in the 90s? Well, it may not surprise you. Here's a post from the 11th of June 1992 by Sandy McKinnon of Strathclyde University. And he said that the Celtic board have taken for granted the supporters' loyalty, and now they don't like it when they stand up to them. How little things have changed, Sandy. Now, I dug even deeper and found something even older than Sandy's post, the 5th of June 1990, from a Morna J. Finlay. Very interesting. It was talking about Wallace Mercer's plans at the Times to buy Hibs and amalgamate them with Hearts to create one Edinburgh Super Club. And at the bottom, Finlay says, "I take everything back I've ever said about the Celtic board. So already as far back as 1990, internet users were talking about criticisms of the Celtic board. And I thought, Morna J. Finlay? That's very interesting. Could it be the very person who literally stood up to Peter Lawwell at the AGM in 2025, the Celtic Trust's own Jeanette Finlay? Remember, back in the very early days of the internet, they used to say, never put your real name on the internet. You can't trust anything you buy off the internet. So I thought, could it be? But maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's somebody with a similar name. Except I dug a little deeper and found this post, again from Morna J. Finlay, on the 20th of June 1991, saying the Celtic board have appointed Liam Brady, former Irish internationalist, as the new manager of the Boys, and in the signature it mentions Morna Finlay. Janet, we're getting warmer. Now Jeanette, if you're watching out there, great interview recently with the great Paul John Diggs on XM. Let us know if it was you making these early internet posts and a pioneer of Celtic board criticism on the internet. Now, not everybody was as insightful as the legs of Jeanette. We have a post here from the 12th of April 1999 from Martin Jansen, and it says, no offence, but scoring in the Scottish League doesn't mean you're a brilliant player. Any attempts to spell Van Hooydonk and Negri gets both wrong. I've seen Larsson for some years in the Dutch League. Nice player, but not world class. Nope. If O'Neill is Saint Martin, then Jansen is Sinner Martin. However, my favourite thread I found on the old Usenet boards came from the 9th of May 1998 from Owen Adams after Celtic finally captured a league title, and it says, well, you blue noses, are you singing now? You thought we'd blown it last week, but the Celts never give up. A truly professional performance from the best team in Scotland. Not being put off by your typical Masonic referee at Tannadice with your weekly penalty. All I can say is 10 in a row, where are you now? Never mind, you can join Linfield in the UEFA Failures Cup, smiley face. Celtic and Cliftonville are where they belong, in the European Champions Cup. Maybe Scotland will do well in the tournament next year, since the only Scottish club capable of winning the European Cup are back again. Chucky Arla. P.S. Sammy, I hope you realise now your Dunfermline only got a point off us last week because we wanted to clinch the title back at Paradise. Up yours, Sammy, whoever you were. My favourite post back in the day from Owen Adams. Owen, if you're out there, if you're still alive and if you're watching, let us know.
And Celtic are the champions of the Tennant Sixes. Well, a tremendous performance by Celtic, winning by 4 goals to 2. So John Collins, the Celtic skipper for this tournament, coming forward to receive the Tennant Sixes trophy from Mr. John Hamilton, the trade marketing director of Tennant.
So everything mentioned so far is from fans themselves, fan forums, mailing lists, like the oldest one I found, Boys Talk from 1997, a mailing list from Boys Talk, so a shout out to them for being Celtic fan media pioneers. Recently, the great David Lowe went on the Football Smash YouTube show to talk about the changes he would like to see happen at Celtic today. And in that podcast, he mentioned that way back in the 1990s, he mentioned this newfangled thing called the World Wide Web to the Celtic board. And in the 90s, they had no interest of launching a website. So when exactly did Celtic Football Club decide to get in on the act like David Lowe originally suggested? In the 1999 annual report, I found this under merchandising. The very last sentence says there are plans to generate additional sales via the internet, whatever that new thing is. But the cynically minded of you are probably thinking, did Celtic just use this as a cash grab, as a way to milk yet more money out of the fans? Surely not. Except that's exactly what they did. April 2001, a screenshot of the Celtic website, and it has a quote from then Celtic manager and current Celtic manager Martin O'Neill, which says, by purchasing merchandise direct from this official website, you will be making a direct contribution to the Celtic Football Club. These purchases help immensely towards investing in youth development and strengthening of the first team squad for the long-term future of Celtic Football Club. Thank you for your incredible support. Was Martin O'Neill begging for online money in 2001, or was it just another cash grab? Well, we had plenty of merchandise available on the website. Let's see what sort of merch Celtic had. If you were a fan of Cream and Peak, this was the time for you. Sand Peak, Cream Hoop, Cream V-neck, and tartan boxers for just a tenner. What about home media? Well, Celtic were a bit ahead of the curve here because we were already in 2001 selling DVDs, like Henrik's new DVD, available for just £20, whereas it was $15 on video. Just a few months after the famous 6-2 victory, we already have it out on home video and on DVD, and I'm pretty sure Santa Claus left it under young Paul's Christmas tree that year as well. Now, the next stage we enter, if you ever watch any American documentaries about the history of the internet, is called the Wild West era, the mid-2000s to the early 2010s. This is when the average Joe Miller now had internet in his house. It wasn't just one person on the street, most people had access to the internet. So you had Celtic fans flocking to web and news pages, the message boards like Kerrydale Street, Celtic Minded, E-Tims, Talk Celtic. You had an explosion of new members all at once, all ready to argue with each other about whether or not we should sign Thomas Gravison. And at the time you didn't know if you were arguing with somebody of intellect who worked in the sciences or the arts, or if you were arguing with an unhinged lunatic posting from his parents' attic, or as I like to call him, Paul Brennan from Celtic Quick News. Now, it wasn't just message boards, we also had News Now Celtic. Instead of having to rely on the red tops and the mainstream press, we now had our own news websites, and you could find all the links on News Now Celtic, still used to this day. 2008's website of the year. I couldn't find a screenshot I was hoping for. If you remember around 05-06 when Nakamura first joined, it gives you the flag of the country the news story comes from, and I remember at the time there would be a load of Japanese flags. However, if you're interested in what the news sites were saying at the time, you would find some stuff that was true, some stuff that wasn't. So here, Silvino in Celtic Talks may or may not have been true. Celtic fans hijack beer contest, probably true, but the headline I found most interesting, even back then, was Celtic poised for self-destruction, which just seems like an eternal truth as a Celtic fan at times. And as well as all that, we now had mobile phones which could get the internet for the first time. And it wasn't just news and message boards, music was being shared far and wide, like the ones I've posted on the channel from the great Tandoori Tony and from Rocky Bats and Balls. Which brings us, of course, to the modern era, the mid-2000s to today, which I don't need to go over in detail. As you all know, whether you're arguing with more lunatics on Twitter, watching your favourite content on YouTube, listening to your favourite podcasts on Spotify, or getting all your news from Channel 67, you're aware of the modern era of the internet. And what I've taken next is a early photo of some of your favourites, the oldest I could find, as we've all grown older together and will continue to do so for many years to come.
Well, it's a grand old team to play for. And it's a grand old team to see. And if you know your history...
Brother Desmond, what are you doing?
Now, of course, it's time for this week's Bad Boys List. Let's take a look at who's earned a spot on the list. We have Lawrence Donegan, a former regular guest on the Celtic Underground and a worker for Brian Wilson as part of the Labour Party, a researcher for Celtic chairman Brian Wilson. Lawrence hasn't taken too kindly to some stuff these days, so he posted on Twitter recently about Celtic's refusal to fund an Israeli club who generate weapons for the IDF by £2 million over the signing, much talked about, of Jocelyn Tabby. Lawrence didn't take the side of most fans in this one. He tweeted, "Mission accomplished by Celtic's lunatic political fringe. What's next for them? Sell Carter Vickers and protest at US foreign policy? No false equivalence there, Lawrence. Funding a weapons manufacturer is just as bad as keeping an English-born American international." Very good. Also, Lawrence decided to directly criticise the Celtic Fans Collective. The leadership of this collective, in inverted commas, has no interest in bringing overdue change at Celtic. They are Trot SWP activists who want to use the club to promote their fringe political agenda. Best ignored. Completely untrue, as of course the fans collective has already forced change at Celtic with Peter Lawwell gone, Wilfred Nancy gone, and rumours of Michael Nicholson of course handing in his resignation. So just some blatant untruths from Lawrence, who of course is a long-term defender and lover of Peter Lawwell. And I found a clip that was brought to my attention from 2024. Host Harry Brady and the boys are discussing, Lawrence is a guest, and they're talking about the idea that Peter and Mark Lawwell should leave Celtic, and listen to long-term Lawwell loyalist Lawrence Donegan screaming no at the very thought of Peter leaving the club.
Desmond sets the agenda, and he should go as well. I agree. He's got to go as well.
Well, you were off 5 minutes ago. You were shouting about Peter Lawwell and Mark Lawwell having to go. You're not the issue.
They need to go because the perception.
No! The very thought of a Celtic without Peter Lawwell was enough to send Lawrence over the edge. Lawrence turned things around because on that podcast you did have some valid points and criticisms of Dermot Desmond, but those recent posts have gotten out of hand, sir. Next up on the bad boys list then, we've previously discussed AI-generated YouTube content on the channel, but there's a new level to it with this new channel, intelligently entitled AI, playing off some Scottish colloquialisms. Now, I had to watch this full video. I have cropped just the first minute of it for you to watch, and you'll know to avoid this channel at all costs going forward. This video is about French coach Wilfred Nancy, much discussed, joining Celtic. French coach Wilfred Nancy. This is what the AI-generated channel came up with to show Wilfred Nancy arriving at Celtic. It's bizarre. That's supposed to be Wilfred Nancy. Wait for his voice.
Ooh, hello, Sasquatch. Can I have a pillow and blanket for my friend Blanket? Pop?
Frenchman.
He's so sleepy now. Aeroplane.
Murderer.
Make him so sleepy.
American. Here's a nice touch. Big ripper from Wilfred Nancy there. Knocks out his enemy.
I am Willie. I am Willie.
This is where things take a desperate turn. If you thought that was bad, it turns psychotic.
What a moment.
Wait for it. Assaulting an old man, running out of the airport.
Happy birthday, Bert. Fucking 90 the day. I just wanted to see the kilts. All the way from Stotterville, USA. Sheila! I'll see you soon, you fucking bitch!
What was that? If there's a human being behind that, please get in contact with me, because I will remove you from the list if you can explain your creative choices in that video. Now, I was going to put Open Goal on the list, but I'm going to give them a rare exemption this week after that. I was going to put Open Goal on because Cy was off this week, so he was going to avoid being put on the bad boys list. It was Slaney, Scott Allen, Andy Halliday and Tony Watt discussing who was the better fullback between Kieran Tierney and James Tavernier. And none of them just said it's obviously Tierney. They discussed it back and forth and sort of settled on maybe Tierney. I'll let you away with it just because of that, but no more of that, please.
Did I just say that? I did just say that.
I'm standing now, come on!
Here I go. Palms dry, mouth dry, interbatic area moist.
Arms and let this moment linger.
Shit. I'm crashing and burning. That stupid bloody hippie sold me down the river. Plan B. What is Plan B?
Oh, my love, I place this wedding ring upon your finger.
Plan C? Is there a Plan C?
Share our love, for we must say goodbye. Bravo! Bravo!
Now, this week's Right Good Tim's list, something more cheerful. Let's take a look at who's pleased us here at Channel 67 in recent times. the fantastic already mentioned David Lowe, but I'm not putting David on the list this week for what he had to say on the Smash YouTube show. Something else David said during his interview on This Is XM stood out to me as worthy of the list.
You know, so you get two polarities here, and right now, never the twain.
Talking about bringing the board and fans together.
We need a peacemaker. We need a pacemaker. I've been speaking to a Lucifer, some ganja.
There is that.
Hey mom! I sound like Wilfred Nancy in that video. Some ganja suggestion from David Lowe. And it got me thinking of who's your dream Celtic media blunt rotation. 4 members. I go with myself, David Lowe, Tandoori Tony, and Morna J. Finlay. They're my choices. Let me know yours. David, not the only member of the Right Good Tim's list this week. We also have something a bit different from the Here Comes the Guillotine podcast. Now, this is not strictly a Celtic fan podcast. However, the great Frankie Boyle and Susie McCabe are both Celtic fans, and they're discussing with Christopher MacArthur Boyd, who is not a football fan at all, explaining to him why there's so much uproar and unhappiness amongst the Celtic support at the minute. Any non-Celtic fan podcast that brings this to people's attention is good in my books, and a particular shout out to Susie McCabe, who I thought put across fans' grievances particularly well, and some brilliant stuff from Frankie Boyle discussing the St Al's Old Boys closed off club that is the Celtic board. And finishing things out this week, we have the fantastic Tony Haggerty, his first time on the Right Good Tim's list. Recently, he went on This Is XM for a catch-up with Paul John Diggs. We haven't seen them together for a while, but like old friends who haven't seen each other in a long time, they picked up right where they left off. Eagle-eyed viewers can probably see we're in a brand new studio now here at Channel 67, and when I was painting up the studio, I listened to this entire interview. It was like being back in COVID times without the deadly pandemic. Tony Haggerty, always a pleasure to talk with, and always an encouraging and friendly figure on social media. So I just want to say once again, thanks to everybody for joining us today on a Celtic Channel 67.
I thought Frankie Boy was dead.
I'll keep at him.